Hey team, hope you're well. Today I am going to take you through a bit of a win I had recently where I was able to get a client approved when they were declined working with another broker just a few months ago. I'm making this video in February 2026, and these clients were declined working through another broker going to another main bank in February 2025. So this was maybe 5 months ago. And I'm going to explain how I was able to get them approved and what differences I did to enable them to get the outcome that they desired. Okay, that's what we're going to go through in today's video. Now, I will share my screen and go through the numbers for this, but I do also want to disclose that just because I was able to get them approved doesn't mean I'm necessarily always going to be able to get someone approved. You know, if you've previously been declined in the past, right? But what I'm trying to achieve in this video is a couple things. I want to display transparently how I would go about my process for this client and why I was confident in being able to get them approved in the first place. And me ultimately trying to win your business, right? The whole purpose of this YouTube channel, as you probably have caught on right now, is I'm trying to be your mortgage broker. I'm trying to win your business and transparently showcase to you how I operate and try help you in your endeavors to whatever you're wanting to achieve. Okay, so this client, the reason why they were declined initially was because the previous broker didn't represent them very well, if I'm fully honest and transparent. And that's okay, because it was quite a complicated deal, to be honest. And I know if I had picked up this opportunity for the client maybe this time last year, I probably wouldn't have been able to get them approved either. Okay, so this person was self-employed. Okay, and how their financial position wasn't presented originally in September in a way where they had a lot of confidence, the bank that was approached, for them to be approved for the scenario. So this client, just to give a bit of a breakdown, is trying to get their lending approved with another bank so they can get a better solution to what they're getting with their existing bank. So the objective is we need to be able to prove that they are able to make the repayments with their existing position given their income that they're making in their role, if it's viable, right? So we have to be able to provide to them the confidence. Okay, now with business income or self-employed income, it actually can be very subjective to what that business or what that person is actually making year on year. If you have a salary, it's pretty easy to identify how much someone is making per year, right? If someone has a $90,000 salary and they've been getting that PAYE income week on week for 12 months, pretty easy to display that, they're making $90,000 per year. But with a business, it actually is very subjective, is the word I like to use when determining how much someone is making, right? Generally, you'll hear a bank wants to see 2 years worth of financials just so they can see that supporting evidence of what income that business or that person is making. And that is, predominantly true. And that's probably a pretty fair assessment, because generally for a business, if a lender is going to give you money based on how much that business is making, they do want to see conviction that that is recurring income coming in, right? That's the point of view to the lender, right? If they can see, maybe 6 months worth of statements, that might not be enough evidence to suggest that they can make that income or salary that they're paying themselves recurringly, right? So I won't go really too much into detail about how it was presented previously, but the way that I presented it now is I did two different things, okay? So I did a bit more of a thorough breakdown to differentiate how much the business was making that this client of mine was operating, okay? So this business, for a bit of context, I've just rounded the numbers, so I'm not taking the exact client's position, but it's very reminiscent to this formula, okay? So the net profit for both of these financial years was pretty minimal. The reason why it was pretty minimal is for tax-related purposes, right? Obviously, the less of a net profit the business is making, the less tax liability there is, right? So it reduces those expenses. So maybe they were deliberately claiming a lot of expenses throughout the business to reduce their tax liability. Very, very normal for a business in New Zealand, a small business. Very, very common. However, with that being said, sometimes because the business itself is making pretty minimal profit, it can also negate the ability to borrow more money because it doesn't display how much that business is actually really making as a profit, right? So we can't display much evidence to the bank. So in doing this, from these additional addbacks, which is something you can commonly do in a bank application to lenders, is you can add back expenses from financials like depreciation and home office expenses, because they were going to be paid anyway. So a lot of lenders will say you can add back these expenses to the business and actually calculate this total and then deduct the tax. So this is just a very basic formula that a lot of lenders will accept if it's explained thoroughly. So this is what I presented, is that the business is basically making this net surplus. So I averaged the two of these to get this figure. So I might have said, hey, main bank, the business is actually making this much on average for these 2 financial years. This client of mine did pay themselves a salary, right? And we can use that in the application. So in the financial year of 2025, there was a higher salary paid here. I put $80,000. It was a little bit less in financial year 2024. I actually didn't have a lot of data for this client with their existing financial year numbers. So from the accountant and the client, that wasn't really provided to me, these metrics. So I'm recording this video in February 2026, and I actually didn't have a lot of metrics for what they had earned from, say, April 1st, 2025 to March 31st, 2026. So a lot of times they will take the most recent financial year. The bank or lender is essentially just wanting to understand what their risks are. So sometimes, if it makes sense, and it can be accurately displayed, I might provide this information if the timing is right, depending on when it's being done. But ultimately, again, coming back to how I was able to get this approved is give the bank the reason why this loan is affordable and proving their income actually is what it is to be able to afford the repayments, right? Anyway, so regarding the salary, right, that the clients paid themselves back to this, I've added these two collectively together and averaged the two of these 2 financial years to get this number, okay? So I'm saying, hey, bank, business is making $5,400 a year. Annual salary is $65,000 a year. Clients are going to be getting rental income of $650 per week. They want to be able to get a loan of, I think, around $550,000 to $600,000 to pay out their existing bank so they can get a better solution for their loan. Here is the borrowing assessment based on the numbers that I've input. Furthermore, this person that did do this application only submitted this application to one bank, which I think is a mistake because even though this bank that they did go to is a very, very, very good bank, I have a good relationship with them, it is a bit of a, what's the word to use? I think it's not very good to the client if I'm only going to one bank in this application, that it's a certainty that they will get an approved. I always like to have backup options or solutions where I might submit an application to, say, 2 or 3 banks, depending the complexity of the deal, right? This deal is quite close in terms of the margin between what the client can afford with my assessment relative to what they need, right? So to have insurance, I might say, look, we'll go to this bank as plan A, but I'm also going to try these 2 banks as well in the event that plan A is not going as well. So we still have a solution. There's been many times, especially with self-employed income, where it is a bit subjective, where I've applied with multiple banks and plan A bank actually doesn't work out. So to represent my client in the best way, not only am I presenting this in detail and justifying why this is affordable with what they're looking to do, I'm also going to multiple banks in this scenario. I think for this client, I actually submitted this to 4 banks, not the bank that they had already been declined at, and we were approved at 2 banks and declined at 2, right? So we had 2 options, and then we reviewed what bank was going to make sense, and then ultimately came up with a decision that to go with that one ultimately. But that's the story, guys. So it's not super high level, but I just kind of wanted to illustrate again my process and go through how I go about my business effectively. In these scenarios, maybe if you have been declined, I can look at it from my lens and see if there's something I can do. But I just want to highlight this one because it was a little bit of a win I had recently for the client, and it makes sense to do. And we got 2 approvals from out of 4 lenders, so thought it was a pretty good outcome, and just wanted to share that today. Again, I'll leave my stuff in the description if you guys ever want to reach out to me and maybe review your position and see what options you have available to improve your financial position. And if you don't want to work with me, that's totally fine. I'll leave some videos on the screen if you want to continue watching my content, and maybe there's some value to be had there. Cheers.